April 2nd, 2020. Maeve Kennedy and her 8-year-old son Gideon. Tragically, they accidentally drowned while out in a canoe. This once again brought public attention. Back to the Kennedy family. To this day, 11 members of the Kennedy family have died under unnatural circumstances. This has cast a grim shadow over one of America's most influential political dynasties. The Kennedy family story starts with the patriarch Joseph P. Kennedy. Every Kennedy you know of today is one of his descendants. He was the son of poor Irish immigrants, desperate to change his family's fate. He got into Harvard University. After graduating, he worked his way up to become a bank chairman. After that, he dove headfirst into politics, raising money for Roosevelt and helping his campaign. After Roosevelt was elected president, he returned the favor, appointing him the U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom. But he wasn't satisfied with just that. He also hoped that his own children could reach the center of American power. He had 4 sons. At first, he pinned his hopes on his eldest son, Joseph Jr. Joseph Jr. was a U.S. military pilot in World War II. During a mission, his plane malfunctioned, and he was killed in the crash. He was the first member of the Kennedy family to die unexpectedly, John F. Kennedy. John also served in World War II and nearly lost his life several times. But his luck was a little better than his brother's. He not only survived but also became a war hero, making him famous even before he went into politics. Later, he lived up to expectations and was elected President of the United States. This is the President Kennedy we're all familiar with today. After John was elected, appointed his own brother, Robert Kennedy, as Attorney General. The 2 brothers were extremely close. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, John had Robert act as his representative to meet with the Soviet ambassador, and they successfully resolved the crisis. During John's presidency, the Kennedy family was incredibly prominent, considered the most powerful family in all of America. But then a tragedy that shocked the world would forever change the Kennedy family's destiny. On November 22, 1963, John and his wife Jacqueline were visiting the city of Dallas, seeking support from the southern states to prepare for his re-election campaign. As the presidential motorcade passed through Dealey Plaza, the first gunshot suddenly rang out. This shot missed, but the shooter quickly fired again. The second shot hit John in the neck. After being hit, John clutched his wound in pain and slumped to one side. But the truly fatal shot was the third one. This one struck John directly in the head, and the bullet blew away part of his skull. Jacqueline, sitting beside him, scrambled desperately toward the trunk of the car, trying to retrieve a piece of her husband's skull. But it was all for nothing. John died instantly. The onlookers in the crowd started to run, and the scene descended into chaos. The news of President Kennedy's assassination shocked the entire world. The entire American public was plunged into immense grief. After the incident, the police quickly arrested the shooter Oswald. But just 2 days after his arrest, while he was being transferred by the police, he was shot and killed in plain sight by another man, Jack Ruby. This, in turn, shrouded the entire case in a massive conspiracy theory. Regarding the assassination of President Kennedy, you can find an endless number of different analyses online. So here I'd like to share my take on it with you all. After Kennedy was assassinated, the U.S. government conducted 2 major investigations. The first investigation was conducted immediately after the assassination. The second investigation took place 13 years after Kennedy's death, in 1976. The second investigation is widely considered to be the most comprehensive and authoritative one to date. The committee ultimately wrote a report that was hundreds of thousands of words long, which was published in its entirety on the U.S. National Archives website. I've gone through this investigation report, and here are my conclusions. 1. Based on the physical evidence from the scene and ballistics analysis, it's certain that Oswald fired 3 shots. The second and third shots hit Kennedy, and the third shot was the one that directly caused his death. Now, there was a theory that the time between 2 of the shots was too short for them to have been fired by the same person. However, the investigation report refuted this claim. That claim was based on the assumption that the shooter was using a telescopic sight, but Oswald was using iron sights. The committee later had people run a simulation, which proved it was possible. 2. The committee couldn't rule out the possibility of a second shooter. Based on acoustic analysis, they believed that between Oswald's second and third shots, there was very likely another gunshot. The timing of this shot was very close to Oswald's third shot. However, aside from the acoustic analysis, only the testimony of some witnesses could support this theory. No physical evidence of this shot was found at the scene. If this shooter really did exist, the shot they fired didn't hit anyone. Bullets and shell casings were also lost in the chaos at the scene. As for this gunman, the commission couldn't determine if he even existed or if he had any connection to Oswald. Third, regarding Oswald, There's evidence suggesting he was an extreme communist. His most likely motive was his dissatisfaction with the Kennedy administration. As for Jack Ruby, he was a nightclub owner. His most likely motive was to avenge Kennedy. But the commission also admitted that they couldn't be certain about either of their motives. The commission investigated these two men in great detail. There's no evidence that anyone put them up to it or knew about their assassination plans in advance. There's also no evidence that their relatives or friends gained anything from this in any way. Fourth, the commission believes that the Kennedy assassination could have been a conspiracy, but they have no evidence to prove it. And fifth, based on the available evidence, the commission ruled out the Soviet government, the Cuban government, Fidel Castro's organization, the American Mafia, the U.S. Secret Service, the CIA, and the FBI as groups of having organized the assassination. Those are all the conclusions I could draw from this investigation report. I believe that behind President Kennedy's assassination, there's a conspiracy that we still don't know about. But then again, no matter what a president does, they're bound to step on some people's toes. There will always be someone who wants to assassinate the president. The number of people who want to kill Trump today isn't necessarily any smaller than the number of people who wanted to kill Kennedy back then. The best way to prevent tragedies like this is to beef up security. After Kennedy's assassination, the U.S. government really stepped up its security measures. And even though there were still attempts on the president's life, none of them ever succeeded again. After John F. Kennedy's death, his brother Robert Kennedy carried on his legacy and continued his career in politics. He once said that assassinations don't change the course of history, but on June 5, 1968, just as he was about to secure the nomination for U.S. president, he too was assassinated after giving a speech. The investigation that followed revealed that the killer was a Palestinian man with strong anti-Semitic beliefs. He did it because Robert was a strong supporter of Israel, so he killed him. The suspicious circumstances surrounding this case were far fewer than those in President Kennedy's assassination, and the findings of the investigation were much more conclusive. After Robert's unexpected death, only one of Joseph Sr.'s four sons was left. That was his youngest son, Edward Ted Kennedy. Edward was incredibly lucky. Just 3 months after his brother the president was assassinated, a plane he was on unexpectedly crashed. The pilot and an aide were killed, but he miraculously survived. In 1969, he accidentally drove his car into a river, and the female passenger with him died, but he managed to escape. He received numerous death threats throughout his life, but he lived to be 77 years old, eventually passing away from cancer. He's been called one of America's greatest senators, serving 8 terms and achieving a great deal. In his later years as a senior figure in the Democratic Party, he helped Barack Obama win the party's nomination during his presidential campaign. Besides these 3 brothers, other members of the Kennedy family also died in tragic accidents. For example, their sister Rosemary. 8 others also died, but the deaths of these members had very little to do with politics. So why did so many members of the family have accidents? Well, one theory is that their family might carry a kind of daredevil gene. This gene makes people more inclined to seek out adventure and explore while ignoring potential dangers. Even though so many people have passed away unexpectedly, the Kennedy family line is still going strong today. The main reason for that is they had a lot of children. The patriarch Joseph started things off with 9 kids, and his son Robert went on to have a whopping 11 children. And while there are still plenty of Kennedys around, in recent years, their political influence has weakened considerably. Of all the family members alive today, only one is still involved in politics, and his standing is a far cry from the generations before him. Looking back on the family's history, from the day Joseph Sr. got into Harvard, determined to change his family's fate, more than 100 years have passed. In that 100 years, the family produced a president, an attorney general, 2 ambassadors, a chairman of the Olympic Committee, 7 members of Congress, and a governor. They went from being a poor immigrant family and transformed themselves into one of the most powerful dynasties of their time. But fate is a cruel thing. At the very height of their power, it dealt them its most devastating blow. All of their ambitions and their fame vanished with the sound of a gunshot. After 100 years of turmoil, the Kennedy mystique has gradually faded away. And that's the main story for this video. If you enjoyed it, we hope you'll give it a like and subscribe. We appreciate your support. Model, it's our biggest motivation to keep going.